All right, Ro. Well, God, good morning. Hope you're well. Hope you are enjoying these early starts. And for that inspirational speech that we had a second ago, the students aren't getting that again. So it's fantastic to have you here. Just to let any of the students know, Rónán has gotten up at Lahore, Teresha, God knows what o'clock to get this done, because obviously we really want to get the students value in this, and I really appreciate you getting up early for this, Ro. For anyone who doesn't know, this is part B of our podcast here, our second section, where we're going to go through in detail what's on paper 1 and what's on paper 2, and Rónán's going to give us his in-depth analysis of it, how he feels we should study, and what we can do to actually separate ourselves from other people. What are the biggest mistakes? If you do not know what's on paper 1 and paper 2, it's probably best for you to go over and look at podcast number 1, so you get a general feel of the different parts that you need to be aware of, versus maybe being a little bit overwhelmed here. So definitely go back and listen to part 1. And in part 2 here, Rónán's going to tell us about paper 1 and paper 2, but in a little bit more depth. Anyway, so Ro, good morning.
Morning, Harriet.
Very good, very good, thank you. So just to remind students from podcast 1, this is what I remember. We have paper 1, and first of all we have an oral, but the oral obviously is gone. That's 240 in the bag for just breathing, so that's fantastic. And then we for paper 1, I remember we were talking about, there was the listening comprehension, there was an essay, and I know you're going to give us some really good advice on those 2 things. And paper 2 was a combination of things, which, to be honest with you, off the top of my head, I can't remember the different parts, but I know you're going to go into
yeah, well, actually, you knew it well there. I was just sharing the screen there with us anyway, so you can see it there. But that's
this the layout of the papers here.
Yeah, exactly. So they already have the 40% there, and that's their layout there. They've got listening, the essay, and paper 2, reading comprehension. They've covered 5 stories, 5 poems, and extra literature. Usually it's going to be a play on Trial, or a lot of them might do Gaff or Higna, Titcher, which are other stories as well. So yeah, that's their set there. So will I jump into it and go for paper 1 straight away?
Yeah, fantastic. So for anyone there, they could give that a screenshot, and they'd know that there's the basis of what's actually on the paper and what they need to do. So so tell us a little bit about paper 1. Let us know what's going on here.
Yeah, let's go back there if I want to take a quick screenshot. But yeah, so with paper 1, they've got they'll walk in, they'll have their listening exam first. The listening is just the one that I out of all everything we're going to talk about, I think the listening is the one students should be looking at as being the most important. It's been the one that's most underdeveloped, I think, by students. If you're looking at it even straight away, I'd be putting in place a plan to get on top of the listening now. It's even if you're seeing where students would score worst on, it was really badly answered last year. First thing I would say to myself to do is that, like, if you're looking at it, when this goes out tomorrow, students will have 13 weeks until the Leaving Cert. They want to be taking at least 1 full, my advice anyway, whatever, they go what they want, but I'd be advising to take at least 1 full week off where you're not looking at anything, you're completely recharging. But even then, if you're saying, like, right, you've got 12 weeks to study, if you're spend, let's say, 5 hours a week studying Irish, and maybe if you're spending 4 hours a week, you'd have 48 hours to invest into Irish. Spend 5 hours a week, that'll give you 60 hours you can invest in. And the listening will be 60 marks out of the remaining 360. So the listening will be 1/6 of your overall examinable grade. I suppose it's on the table now. So I'd be stressing students, like, if you're looking at it like it's 1/6 and they've got 60 hours they can spend studying, they want to be spending about 10 hours doing the listening. And that would really mean going back and doing at least the last 8 to 10 years of reading comprehensions. And to properly do a reading comprehension will take you about an hour. Like, you go through it, you test yourself on it. It might take about 25, 30 minutes to do it. Then you're going to go back over, correct it, find the vocab you didn't know, build that, take note of it, get organized with it. And if you end up going over and doing the last 8 to 10 years of the Leaving Cert listening comprehensions, your grade is going to improve significantly. That's the first thing I'd stress the students to do. Second thing, it's just in the day of the exam, make sure you listen to I said earlier, I think in the first one as well anyway, but just make sure you tune the ear in, listen to listening comprehension on the day of the exam. Before about 20 minutes or half an hour before you walk into the exam, it'll tune your ear in well. And then the other last thing is, of course, is try and start listening, make the habit of listening to the news and stuff like that as well. You can get them through Irish as well. You can get an RT as well, or TG Car, and that's another just a good way of immersing yourself in the language. One other last thing I would say, if you find yourself struggling hugely with the listening, and this is very, very common, as students would say, I'm absolutely atrocious at it, and you know, I got like really bad, like I got really, really low marks in it. To build your confidence up, if you're out walking or out and about, even start listening to the junior cert ones, and it's just about hearing Irish, and that will complement your Irish across the board. It'll just make you better. Like, will help you with your essays, help you with your reading comprehensions. The more and more you're listening to it, the better you're going to get. So I advise students even to start just listening to even junior cert ones, get the confidence up, then you can move on from there. But that's if you're starting at, you know, if let's imagine if you're one of these students who was thinking, God, I was nearly going to drop Irish, but now you're going to drop down to RD level, you're considering it because you're really bad listening, and now you've got your full marks in the orals, you're going to go for the higher. To build the listening up, that's the way I do it at the start. And one other thing as well is that the last couple of years, and this will strengthen my argument again, I suppose, but the last couple of years, the listening's been so hard. 2018 and 19 in particular. And I'd expect, again, 2020 definitely is going to be very, very tough. So if you're practicing and you're building yourself up, I'd advise maybe to stay away from 18 and 19 until you've gotten your confidence up, because they're two very, very tough years.
Okay, so the first thing that I want to touch on there that I thought was really, really, really good is the fact that you said, okay, well, if you have, let's say 13 weeks, 1 week off that you're going to take, but you have, this is not something that I hear a lot from teachers, is if you have, and being honest about it, 60 hours to invest into Irish spread over those weeks. So you're saying the 5 hours per week, which seems so manageable, seems so doable if you break it into study sessions like that. And the fact that you're saying, okay, well, involved in that, you're actually giving students time. You're saying this is when you have to do it. This is part of your study. I would suggest, so you have it as the 1/6 or the 10 hours for that, which then gives you the 8 to 10 reading or the listening comprehensions on it. I think that's quite powerful, because a lot of students may struggle to think about that in that sort of terms, in a macro sort of term, because they have, 6, 7, or 8 subjects. In the 6, 7, or 8 subjects, they probably have maybe 6, 7, or 8 things. Yeah. So to have that idea there, that's absolutely fantastic. The idea I really like then is of the junior cert thing, to bridge that gap, and for confidence. I would think of something similar along the lines of biology in terms of the questions that are asked, and I think that's quite powerful for them as well.
I had it with the junior cert one. It's just, I had a student last year in the grinds, and he took up Irish. He was my age really, and he wanted to go back and be a primary school teacher. And he started the grinds in maybe October. In order to be a primary school teacher, you had to get H4. And he was coming back with absolutely nothing really. He didn't really not know Irish. Yeah. And the lad ended up he got a H2 in his Leaving Cert overall. Now he was ruthless with it, but I remember chatting to him, and I couldn't believe, because I only get to maybe do about 3 or 4 listening comprehensions in the grinds. And I did the first one, and I did an easy one at the start of the year, and the guy basically had left a blank page. And then we came back to doing one around April. And I remember the guy was like flying way ahead of everybody. And I asked him, how did you do it? Because you can't cram for that. It's not like you spent a few hours for an essay and crammed it and you got lucky. And he told me that's what he was doing. And that he didn't just, that was just his, that was just his approach. And he said he'd done about 20 of them, but that's the way it came to him. So, but I thought it was a brilliant idea.
The other thing is, I'd suggest that a lot of people, because they're more focused on on say like essays or poems or any of that sort of stuff, that I'd suggest that that's a thing that they leave behind them, that they just say, I'll do that at the end, and they won't invest a lot of time into it and potentially leave some marks on the table. Would that be your experience?
Not with the essay, I think.
I mean with the listening comprehension, they leave marks on the table because.
That's just the way it happens, and it happens as well a lot that like students mightn't even know that they've missed it. Like, and I think it boils down to the way that like the listening comprehension is 20 minutes, And then when you walk into paper one, you're writing your essay for 2 hours and your listening comprehension is 20 minutes. And I've seen before, and I've come out and been speaking to students, like asking how paper one went, and they'd be delighted maybe because their essay came up and they're like, I got all these phrases in and stuff like that. And then I asked about the listening and they kind of laugh, oh, geez, it was an absolute disaster. But they're still walking away absolutely thrilled because in their heads they've written an amazing essay, but they could have been aiming for maybe 40 out of 60 in the listening. And the listening could have been so bad they might have only gotten 15 out of 60. So they might have dropped 25 marks in the listening. But because their dream essay came up or whatever, they might have gotten 80 out of 100 in their essay instead of maybe 70 out of 100. So they might have gained 10 marks in their essay. But the reason they're so happy is that they've been writing away for 2 hours straight, throwing in all their phrases, and they're going through it for 2 hours straight and geez, yeah, I'm nailing this. And they've forgotten about the listening comprehension that's been fairly chaotic as that's first. And that's why I think students, they come out absolutely thrilled. And I don't want to say to them, I don't want to give out saying that they lost the marks from listening. It's obviously it's too late there, but yeah, it just, I found it happens a bit. That students could even miss the huge amount of importance on that. And there's lots of things to it. Right, the other thing as well is that it's a boring way of studying. And you're like, I could sell you to study an essay. I could be like, you study this essay, it's come up 3 times in the last 8 years. Listening comprehensions, it's really, you're sitting down and you're really just grinding the thing out. And it just is something that's completely, it's just not worked on enough.
Yeah. So a nice way to separate yourself. Is there anything just on the correcting of it, or anything weird, or anything that you should look out for?
Yeah, it really, and that's what I was saying about doing it. Like giving yourself an hour to do it. Like sit down and actually go through it in the marking scheme. And when you're grading it, the rule of thumb roughly is, if you're marking it, and if your word is completely misspelled, they won't accept it, right? But a good way of doing it is, I'd be looking out for the first 3 letters are what's most important when they determine if the spelling is going to be accepted or not. Mm-hmm. It's usually going to go down for that. And they're quite strict on they're quite strict on obviously anything in English gets you 0 marks, but just try and I'll give an example. Like 1 year was my friends corrected it 1 year, and it was radio na Gaeltachta, right? So that's R and G. So they'd have but the student wrote RADIO, right, and then na Gaeltachta, and they didn't accept that. But one student had written RADIO and he threw a fod on it, and then he went to that, and they accepted that, right? So the idea with it is just try and look out for that, just to they're just quite strict on they're quite strict on little things like that. So always make sure that you just practice going over them, because if you practice these enough, you'll be always a lot of time. It'll be charities or organisations, and you'll see a lot of the same charities pop up. It might be Cumann Ailse na hÉireann, the Irish Cancer Society, or Cumann Lú Glasgow, the GAA, and you just get used to spelling them. You'll have seen them in the marking schemes. So that's what I'd be looking out for with the practice. Will help you there. And then the other little thing is, when you walk in, most students will know when they walk in to do paper one, when they get the listening comprehension, start translating the questions straight away. But you could find yourself still with about a minute before the listening comprehension starts. And a lot of students will be kind of looking around and just getting nervous. I'd say to read the questions and in your head, try and predict what the answer might be. Loads of time there'll be a question on a job application. So you might see that, and they might be they might be asking what type of qualifications, colleagues are needed, and you can say to your head right, I'm probably going to hear the word cane, degree, tahi, experience, but mark them in your head in advance and be listening out for those words in the listening comprehension. That's what I'd be advising as well. So you can really predict a bit. Like last year was a question, I think about one of them was about what are the farmers worried about, and you could have had an idea. Okay, they might be worried about global warming or tilts, floods, anything like that. You can spot that a bit in advance and just read the questions, and it will give you a good steer on what they're going to be looking for. And you can nearly predict a bit what you're going to hear in the comprehension. Another year was what's putting stress on students, and you could probably guess, we're talking about the Leaving Cert, you'd be able to predict a bit of what they might be looking for, and that can help you when you're listening for it. You can be keeping an eye for those things.
All right, perfect. So listening, focus on it, 10 hours, and then we got a few little tips there. The next thing on paper one, that's the essay, that's the 2 hour idea there. I remember you were saying in the first podcast there's 7 options, 5 essays. What was it? 5 essays, a speech, and a debate.
Yeah, if you basically you've nine options, right? But you've got you get 5 essays, 2 stories, debate, and a speech. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So how would I set up for that role? What would the story be? Would I be preparing in advance for that, or would I be going in?
Yeah. Do you know what I might do? Is I might just very quickly, I can share the screen here with you, and that's actually a copy of last year's paper there. Can you see that there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the first 5, they're the essay titles. Mm-hmm. Then you've got, when you look at B, that's a scale, the story, 2 of them. And then you've got your debate, which is A, and your speech, which is option B down there at the bottom. So really what I'd be advising for students is, I'd imagine if you might be asked that question, should I go for the story? Students might have that. I really advise against it. The first thing to look out for is that, like, it's really stuff from like juniors. Do you remember when you did your junior cert? You'd be a perfect example. Like, do you remember covering the story when you did your junior cert, and you prepared a story maybe about an accident or something like that?
Yeah, I'm 30 year old. That's what I done.
Well, like a big thing is like the students will go into exams, say, like, right, I'm going to prepare a story about a tin fish, and then you because they start off in the story and students do that. So what you're looking out for there is that, like, you really, the only people who do quite well in the story is it has to be very, very creative, and it's hard to get a high grade there. So I'd be, unless you've practiced a lot and you've got a good creative flair, I'd be advising to steer clear of that. Like, so then you're really looking at one little thing, I suppose, if you are and you've worked in during the year and your teacher's giving you all clearness, obviously then fire ahead for it. But it'd be very rare that you would see students going for the story. Then if you're looking at the 5 essays, you have them at the top there. You can do one of them if you want, or you can do a debate or your speech. I'd want to mark there in red, or if you're studying it yourselves or whatever, to really make sure in advance you've learned off the opening and the closing for the debate down there at the bottom. Mm-hmm. And also, how to do the speech, about an introduction and closing for your speech as well, about addressing a crowd and stuff like that. Because what you could find is, like, imagine if you cover a really brilliant essay on technology this year, and it comes up under debate. If you don't know the layout of the debate, you're going to be you're going to be in trouble then. So just learn those things off in advance. It'll set you up well. Like, even last year, my 6th years, most of my class went for that one down there at the bottom. Young people in Ireland look after their health. Now, if they didn't know how to do the debate, they didn't know the layout for the debate, they'd have been ruled out there.
Okay, so
you learn that off in advance.
If you didn't know the layout for the debate, what would it penalise you heavily?
Yeah. You just don't really, you don't go for it at all, because like you'd be just you're aiming for a high grade and stuff. You have to have gotten it, like, and it's not even enough to just say, okay, I'll throw in a little sentence here at the start and a little sentence at the end. You have to remind the examiner throughout that you're in a debate. So make sure you pick one side of the argument, stick only to that, and refer to Lucht and Frassura, the opposition, throughout the debate. Make those little references. Keep going back to them. One little thing as well to look out for is, like, make sure you, like last year in the Leaving Cert, hundreds of students got 0 out of 100 because they didn't translate the question properly. So make sure you get into the habit of doing that. And actually, what I'll do here, I'll scroll down there, because you can see it there, Dave. It's translated there for you. Can you see them?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's basically what I've been working on my 6 years. I just gave them that out to work on. And the reason I gave it to them in Irish first is my advice was, like, right, make sure you translate, you look out for this, find anything you're not sure of, and then you've got the answer there in the next page. And highlight any words that you didn't know. And that's the only way you're going to get good at it. Keep working through the past questions. You see them there. Try and find any word you weren't sure of, like maybe Gaelag or the economy. And then you've got them translated there. But that's what I'd be saying with the essays to work on now, making sure you actually properly comprehend what the title is about. That's so important, because they're very unforgiving with those things. If you mistranslate the title, you write with the wrong thing, you get 0. And then the other big thing is to read the titles very carefully. Like see that there, option B. Can you see my arrow there when I'm moving around?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Brilliant. Yes, you see that there, option B, Manossa Sports, a lot on you on. That's women in sport nowadays. It's women, it's plural. So if you'd have written like an essay only on Katie Taylor, again, you'd have been down marked. So you want to be looking out for rereading the titles very, very carefully.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. I'd say a lot of people then would have to probably invest a good bit of time in learning how to translate those titles, because when they hear that 0 that you threw out there, it's time to get serious about that. And I'd say I would know when I was in school, I would have seen let's say I would have seen sport for part B and gone, yeah, cool. Here's an essay about me lifting weights or whatever it is.
That's just, even if I can bring your attention even to this one here, and actually I'll bring it up to you. See this option here, E there, right? Chunker, the effect, Ahuero, that's climate change. Now, a lot of students would have literally been studying, and they'd have been learning off that essay there on climate change, because that hadn't come up in a couple of years, right? A lot of students would have been going to the exam saying, right, I need to get that climate change essay. Now, they'd have opened up their paper and seen climate change there, and they'd have hammered out the essay they covered in school. But a lot of students would have covered it from when they've been practicing that essay in school, would have been their points of what I can do as a teenager to tackle climate change and stuff about Ireland. But you see that there, it's like different communities around the world. Now, if you would have written about you recycling and stuff like that, and you walking to school instead of getting a lift to reduce your carbon emissions or anything like that, none of that's accepted, because that's not tackling the actual title you have there. So really, really being so careful, and don't be emotive on the day of the exam. Like, a lot of students have been jumped at that because they'd learned their climate change stuff, they'd have fired out that essay, and again, it wouldn't have been relevant. So just be really, really careful on that.
All right, fantastic, unbelievable. Sweet.
That's with the essays. One tiny little thing I'd try and mark to students as well is that when you're walking in, you have 2 hours to write the essay. That's on purpose. The most important paragraph is the introduction. Okay, so do the simple things right. Like, straight away, whatever title is, you saw them back there, pick that title in advance, write that down on the first line so the examiner knows exactly what you're writing about. And then when you're doing your introduction, make sure it's very, very clear for the examiner what your argument is and what side you're on, and so the examiner knows straight away what exactly it is you're writing about. Don't irritate them. Like, you can find sometimes what drives the examiner mad is if they're reading the first page and they've read the first page and they don't know what you're writing about or what your argument is, because a lot of students can throw in this very broad openings are okay, but just make it clear within that what side you're arguing. And so it's like sometimes students will get, and it's okay to do it. I don't want to discourage students from doing it, but sometimes they might have their broad opening that they like to use for any essay. You could say, oh, this been in it, and that's okay. But just make it very clear to the examiner if you're going to do that. Write the title down, the very first line, write out the full title in Irish, and then try within that tell the examiner where you stand on that topic. So if it's on the Leaving Cert, you think students are under too much pressure, make that very, very clear from the start.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. So that's paper one. Any final thoughts, paper one?
No, just with that, don't maybe with the one little thing to look out for here, I'll share the screen here, is the one other small thing to look out for is on that is that these are the past titles on paper one, but try and have a bit of a plan if you're covering essays. Try and look out for 2 things. This one thing I do, usually in the first term, I try and push my students a lot on this, will be to try and get stuff on the life of a teenager covered well. And mainly because it complements the oral a lot, but on top of that, I'd always say to them, look, if you know the life of a teenager very well, every year for the last 8 years you've been covered. And within that you're able to talk about, see the topics down here at the bottom, social media, technology, and these merge in a lot together. I suppose technology is stuff like mobile phones and everything else there, the internet, mental health. And within mental health, the health of youth, really, stuff even get into stuff maybe about even eating disorders or, youth obesity, and then mental health as well, depression. And that can be merged very, very nicely with the stress of the Leaving Cert and stuff like that. Then you've got alcohol and drugs, and I talk a little bit even the abuse of prescription drugs. You see students taking Adderall and stuff like that to help them with exams, and how dangerous that is. And then, of course, just the stress of the education system. And within that, maybe like the benefits as well, arguments about why the education system is good. But what I'd be doing there is I'm trying to encourage students to cover these topics well, because they complement each other. Like you see here, the education system's come up 4 times in the last 8 years, half of the papers. But if you ever talk about within the education system, you can talk about how it's linked a bit to alcohol and drugs, about as well how it's linked to mental health, students being under stress. And those topics will complement each other a huge amount. So if you're picking topics, try and find the topics that complement each other. That's and also try and find topics that pop up a lot in your Leaving Cert.
Perfect. That's a nice little scale there. A nice little tip for you to plan that out.
Yeah, and I would just say as well, I know you've got a bit more time obviously with the exams being put back, but don't try and say, okay, I'm going to learn off 3 more essays. You could end up putting yourself under too much work. And like even there, I'd be worried that if I showed that to people there and they're like, God, I haven't done that, I've only done these 4 essays with my teacher. Don't worry about that. You'll still, if you look back over the past papers, make sure you're covered in the past papers. You know, you're still setting yourself up well for the exam. So there's loads of different ways about going like that. That's just one example.
That's just the angle, one of the angles you took. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Perfect. So paper one in the bag. Paper 2 is. I know we said this the last day. That paper 2 had a few more things on it. Is worth a few more marks. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. Paper 2 is worth 200, and so I'll share the screen there again if you want to. I'll show the quick breakdown of paper 2. Yeah. Paper 2 there, you can see it there. They've got the Leave History, 2 reading comprehensions, 100 marks. They do 5 stories, 5 poems, and an extra. They usually do like extra play, extra literature. And sorry, that's wrong there. See the way it says Filiac 40? That should be 30 there. So the poetry is worth 30 marks, and that's where the 200 comes there.
Yeah, perfect. I was wondering whether a 10-mark tip for the exam. There's a bonus. Thanks for correcting that.
Yeah, so that's the breakdown there. The past question there. So
perfect.
Just, the stories 30 and the poetry is 30 marks. Yeah,
perfect. So tell us a little bit about prose is a story. So if I go, there's stories. Obviously, we read them, we go through them in class, and then so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different stories. But do I as a student, like being in a class, do I cover all 5 of those?
Yeah, you'll cover all 5. You usually get them done in 5th year, and they're good to do stories because they actually just make your Irish better as well. You're working through it, and it's a good way of developing your Irish. But yeah, you do 5 stories, and then you do 5. You covered 5 poems, and the stories there can really be anyone's sort of guess what's going to come up. The stories are very, very hard to predict.
Sorry, only one comes up, correct?
Is that only one comes up? You've no choice, and just make sure you're careful of that. Yes, only one comes up. So and that's it. Like when they're marking it, they're marking 25 for your Irish, 25 for your information and 5 for your Irish. So make sure you've got that covered.
So you kind of really have to know the story if
that's
25 or 30 is for the information.
Yeah, so that's great because they're not as much pressure on you to feel obliged to put in all these like really like you're writing fast, so you don't have to. Sometimes they're not as strict and pulling you down if you make any like small grammar mistakes and stuff. So it's all just about all this the information, and you're trying to give them like thorough knowledge and show the exam you really properly engage the text and stuff like that. And like even the top there, Gnorwood would have been a story most students would have covered. But it's about like a guy called Jimmy who gets killed in Belfast during the times of trouble. And like you want to say, a lot of students say stuff like Jimmy was a family man, right? But you have to be able to back that up information and say like, well, he left the pub early to return home to his family, like Dolce and Chuck Torna, Gluck and Philly Wally Doclan. Like you want to give the examiner that bit of information. Do you see what I mean with that, Dave? Like you're describing him, you have to say, family man, this is why he's a family man, and get into the habit. You're going to make statements about the characters. You back it up with proper evidence.
Something they've done or something has happened.
Yeah. Stories is one that, like, at least in the poetry, they put the poem in front of you, and you can use that to refresh your memory. Stories, you've nothing to help you. Okay, so just
you blank sheet of paper, so it has to be known.
Yeah, and nothing can substitute. Like sometimes I have students who might, if they're chatting about story, they might know the story amazingly in English and they might know it inside out. But that's no use unless you can articulate that in Irish. So it's a hard way of studying. It puts you under pressure. But I would be advising that if you're preparing for your stories, to actually sit back and put a question in front of you and try and write it out on a blank A4 piece of paper, and then find words you don't know. And then if there's any word you don't know, that's when you get your dictionary out, try and argue that point and build up on it. But a lot of times students are studying for the stories. They're sitting there and just reading over the notes. You have to put yourself in an exam scenario and get into the habit of actually writing it out, because that's what they're going to grade you on your Leaving Cert.
Yeah, perfect. And so like I remember you said this to me. Actually, I think it was in school one time we were chatting about predicting. I think we were chatting about predicting and stuff, and you were saying that maybe it's this, maybe I'm wrong with this, but there was something to do with the examiner, like, because it's been out for 8 years now. They're not it's not like a sequence that one reappears again and again. Yeah. What was that again?
No, it's completely that. Like, they're not obliged to say, like, okay, this hadn't come up. Like you could have taken a good guess a while back that Gavin would have come up in 2017 because it had never been asked in the poetry. But there's none. With the poems especially, all the poems been asked, and it's just one I wouldn't. You know me from business. I'd be throwing out predictions all over the place with it, but like it doesn't really, with the stories. I just wouldn't take the gamble. They've mixed it up a lot of times at this stage, and they've shocked people. They're not obliged to ask a certain amount of stories or questions. They're only asking you to cover 5. It's and the other big thing as well, it's 5% of your grade. It's not like they're completely screwing students over. So it's a great way of keeping down the H1 students, and it's a great way of keeping them down by asking a random story or poem that wasn't expected, because that way then only the students who really invest their time and study it very, very well will be covered there. What I would say though, maybe if you were looking at it there, just I'll show you the screen here again. Like what I would say, like imagine if you're like thinking and saying like, right, the two that are more likely would be Herlama. If you had to they'd be slightly more likely would be Herlama Bach and Ushin Adirno, right? They'd be the two that would be a bit more likely to come up. Yeah. If you're looking at it like that and you're like saying, okay, well, Gnaw, Rhodes, Deesh and Cork and Millish, they're the 3 that maybe aren't as likely, right? Especially maybe Deesh, because that came up last year. Still be able to write about a page on it, even a page and a half in very, very basic Irish. So no matter what I find is a lot of the time with this, right, is that when students are told, okay, cover all the 5 stories, they're like, grand, yeah, and then they don't, right? And then they might only cover the 2 that are likely, and then they're surprised and they don't come up. They've nothing to write at all. What I'd say is even be honest with yourself. And even if you're like, right, I'm not going to put that much time into it, at least sit down and open up a page and write down all the key points on one page on let's say something like a Norwood and Deesh. And at least then, even if it's basic enough points, right? And even if it comes up, you're able to get you can write it out and you might maybe get 15 marks. It's still obviously way better than 0. And if you can do that, imagine if it came up in paper 2, you're under huge time pressure anyway. So if, let's say, Surprise and Deesh came up and you had to discuss that, Deesh came up last year, so it's a bit less likely. But even if you had at least a page worth of information, you're able to throw that down. You're still going to be streets ahead of anybody. Most people doing their Leaving Cert because they wouldn't bother covering it. You'll spend 10 minutes writing about Deesh, 15 maybe, but that even frees up 15 minutes for you on other parts of the paper then anyway, and you'll still be able to maybe claw up your marks a little bit there in those other areas. So you're not in a bad position at all. But when you are in trouble is when you leave it blank, and that happened to a lot of students last year. If you look down there, Dave, for the poetry, even imagine if I had left Ontario here blank. That's what I should have done even, and blanked out 2019 and said, okay, Dave, which one do you think is going to come up this year? You'd have picked probably McGraw or Colescar or Gavin. And that's what most students did. And a lot of students just left Ontario here completely blank last year. Whereas even if you knew a few very, very basic points, you'd have been fine for that. So just don't go in. And what happens is most students I find if they take a gamble and they don't study these topics at all, the night before the exam or the weekend before the exam, what they end up cramming are the stories that they haven't done any work on, because they start to panic and they might see something on social media saying, my sister's cousin's aunt or whatever heard that this is coming up or whatever, and then they start studying for that. and they the night before the exam they start panicking, saying, God, what if Gnáród comes up, what if Dísh comes up, and they start trying to cram that last minute where they should really be focusing in on the other stories, and they should have had the basics on those ones covered a while ago. So what I'd advise students, if you're studying now, do Gnáród, do Dísh, get even study them this weekend. Just get, and then if you've got like one A4 page or two A4, if you're aiming for a high grade, you have to really have two A4 pages. But I'm nearly bargaining saying at least have something on it that you can fire down on that, so you're not absolutely in massive trouble if they come up. And then night before the exam, weekend for the exam, you take out those pages written, and it's all your own points in your own handwriting. You go over it, and it'll set you up there.
Fantastic. So study broad, study early, and at least if you get a little bit knocked in the poetry, at least that's in front of you. Versus
100%, yeah. And then you hit the nail there when you said study broad, study early, and then what you do coming up to the night for the exam, then take a bit of a gamble and zone in the week before the exam, zone in an extra detail on the ones that you think are a bit more likely. But don't get too hung up. Like, remember we were talking about the listening comprehension day. That's the same amount of marks as all of the prose and the poetry added together.
Wow.
You know, and that's what I'm trying to be stressing students to be careful about that. The listening comprehension is still where the focus should be. I find students can study that a huge amount, and just be careful about that. Don't fall into that trap of studying the prose and the poetry all the time. I think in poetry, in English, I think it might be worth. Do you know how much it is worth in the poetry? It's like 70% or something like that. And you can count the unseen poem.
Yeah, I can remember.
It's a lot more in English, and I think students might take that over and think that applies to Irish as well. It just doesn't. So be careful about that.
Okay, so that's 60 out of 200 marks for paper 2. What's next?
Then you've got the 2 reading comprehensions, and I'll go with the reading comprehensions. You've got like an hour and a half to do them both. So the reading comprehensions, you'll get 2 reading comprehensions, 45 minutes for each one. They ask you, it's very, very structured. Like they'd ask you 5 questions, and on it, they'll give you 5 paragraphs. They'll ask you 5 questions in each paragraph, and then at the end you'll get a question 6, which can be like for 15 marks. It could be like a broad enough question on the passage you've actually read. So what I might do here is I might actually just but that's what they're looking out for there for you on that. So it's I was going to drag one up, but it doesn't matter. The students will have seen them before. So so it's mainly, but it's with the way it goes is with questions 1 to 5. That's like 35 marks out of 50. You're allowed to quote directly from the text there. But then they'll ask you a question 6, a 6B part, which is worth 12 marks. And you're not allowed to quote from the text there. Just want to stress that the students be very, very careful there. If you do 2 of them, that's 100 marks. And that's what you'd have there. You typically as well, the reading comprehensions tend to be on questions that have come up. It sometimes could be on stuff on the news. So like a couple of years ago, when Steve Jobs, not a couple of years ago, back in 2013, when Steve Jobs died, they put him on the paper, and then it was Nelson Mandela the following year as well. So just look out for that. Like students maybe want to keep an eye out for like Gay Byrne. They might ask a question on that.
So look for obituaries.
Exactly. Yeah. Just with those things. Yeah, you could see something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. A bit morbid. Let's just talk about people that have died. But I know what you mean. It'd be good to have, if you have a look out for that. Then would it be a potential idea then if you were thinking about certain people or certain things that came up around the time of writing the Leaving Cert, to have a look at the big ideas on TG Cahir? They're probably on YouTube and stuff. Yeah,
the only other little thing though is just maybe be a bit careful too, because you can overthink it as well. And like I'd be careful. Like I gave my students a few phrases to use on, like Greta Thunberg is another one. She might come up because of school strikes and stuff like that. But I gave my students a few phrases they could use on it and stuff like that. But I'd be really, really careful that if there's no point, like let's say if I gave you really, really good information on Greta Thunberg or something like that, unless that's in the text, if they ask you to describe her, unless that's actually written in the text, it's no use.
Yes.
You know, so, and that's a really important thing for the marking scheme as well, that like just really look out for that. Like, so it's you have to, the reason that vocab would help you though, because if you're reading down through it, you would they might ask you to describe them. You might see those same words in the description of them, but when you've covered it, so that's where it can stand to you. But yeah, that's it. Very, very hard to predict the reading comprehension stuff.
Right, perfect. And I suppose it's not a general knowledge idea anyway, but if you have the vocab, it's nice. It might give you a bit of confidence and help you understand the piece more to cultivate your answers.
Yeah. The reading comprehensions are generally, though, like I'll show you even a little quick thing here of like how they mark it. The reading comprehensions are generally placed where students score quite highly. Can you see this, Dave, here?
Yeah.
So what you see there is this is a breakdown from the 2017 paper. You can get it on examinations.ie. But that's like the average performance from students. And what you'll notice there is that, like, see the way it's quite, it's in the 50s really. That year, you can see the average mark there. So the listening comprehension, right, was 56%, 33 marks out of 60. And that was 2017, and that they've been getting harder since then. Okay, so just factor that in. The essay 56%, but see that there, the reading comprehension is 76%. Students score high there. So just the only place that pulls down their marks is usually the 6B question, and I'd say we've got a few questions on it with your, so I'll go through it then. But that's there, yeah.
Perfect. So we've got the first two there, the 1655. So and then we just went through Kesh 3. Is that correct? That's the
and then the last little thing we look out for there is the Kesh Car literary pressure, the extra literature, and they mark that out of 40. And what you'll see there at that for students is that with the extra literature, they put a big focus on munos to show you thoroughly engaged in the text. So I found with most students would be doing maybe on trio, but like I'd be really trying to encourage students is that sometimes students will learn off tons and tons of quotes for that play. And they might be able to throw in like 20 quotes or whatever. It's the quotes aren't much use unless you can explain, unless they're relevant and you can really develop and elaborate why that quote was so important. So as students are thinking like, right, I fired, 10 quotes at the examiner. It's the quotes are only useful if it really is relevant to the text. The munos is where you want to be looking out for the minor bits of detail. And that shows the examiner really properly engaged the text. So I'd be trying to pick out that. And a good little bit of a good thing I'd even do is like if you were studying for this yourself and on trial is like open up try and pick a big scene or a random scene even, but if you read that in detail and try to pick out one little random small thing that you would have spotted that and you can put down your exam, nobody else would have. Like, give you a quick example, but I had one of my students last year and she put down the argument that Mary was in Ontrial. It's a story about a girl who gets pregnant out of wedlock or anything like that in the 60s in Ireland, and it just shows how society, like a single mother, society abandons a single mother completely. But she put down the argument that Mary was very innocent and she was ignorant in relation to sexual matters. She didn't really know she could have gotten pregnant, and her argument was that because she had a strong religion, the credit law directly, she anol matter like Kursi Ganesh, she was ignorant in relation to sexual matters. Darla Podrick and Dalla Maloga Curry, Patrick was able to trick her. That's the guy who gets her pregnant. They see that argument. Like a lot of people say, most of the students would have written like, oh, they get pregnant. But her argument was, right, well, the fall her mum was too strict and her mum was too religious and her mum didn't let Mary out. And as a result of this, Mary was very naive. And as a result of this, Patrick was able to take advantage of her. But she argued that those points in her thing, and that's how she got her 40 out of 40. And she put in 4 quotes in her whole answer, and she still got 40 out of 40.
Yeah, so really focusing on the fact that she was able to understand and then actually form an opinion on the text. And
and she even has the call, like it's like she uses her arguments, and she can exactly. She said this is why I think that she got pregnant in the first place, and it's not as simple as just and that's the best way to do it.
Not as simple as what? Sorry, Rob?
What? I knew it. You're gonna cut.
That's my subject. All right. That's
so. But like, it is this thing that like that the way it works as well. She's really the whole thing is if you can spot those angles if you're doing on trio, like you can spot that she has a strong religion, and as a result of that, like the guy who gets her pregnant says like, look, he gives her a fake ring and says, look, now we're married, but now we have to sleep together in order to fulfill our marriage. And she's religious and she buys into that. And that's but if she wasn't so religious and naive, she wouldn't have been in that position.
I get you. Yeah. Patrick, what are you, pouring, whatever, I don't know. Brilliant. So that's this kind of paper two, and as we said, we will get into the other thing, because there actually is, you're correct, there is on that Q&A, there is a good few direct questions based on that, so we could hammer into it more then. But in terms of this, I suggest that students would have taken a lot out of that, and a lot of actual higher level stuff that I find that is really beneficial and really interesting to think of. The fact that I automatically going in would be like, that poetry and that story, I gotta hammer that, because I'm nervous that if I might blank or might not do as well, or it's something I compare for. Whereas the listening comprehension, you don't realize the emphasis that can be actually placed on that. And I think in the last podcast I likened this to English. What Gavin said to me, that a lot of students spend 80% of their time studying paper two, and forget that paper one is 50% of their grade, and you can actually prepare for that and set yourself up in a position to do very well, like you've outlined in the listening comprehension. There. So and to actually give a focus then on the last thing of the understanding versus the quotes, I'd say a lot of people would know that.
Yeah, it is really. And one other last thing just on that, when you're talking about there, it's like if I was starting off on trail or any of your extra, really with any of the paper two stuff, but especially it works quite well for on trail, is that you've got 20 years there of past questions you can work off. Like when I did my Leaving Cert, I did on trail. It's just been there. It's not going anywhere. Translate those questions. You can get them all online, examinations.ie, but nothing can substitute, even whatever it is, if you're doing Hignot, Titer, or Gaffa, but sit back and actually read through all of those and get into the habit of translating them, because you might see those exact same words and quotes come up, and it's like a mini essay, and that's what you just have to factor in. But you need to know exactly what they want you to write about in order to get your marks. Look out for it as well. On trail, a lot of time it can be broken into two parts, or any of these reading comprehension questions, they can be split into two parts. Like it could be like how one character might play a role in Mary's suffering. So you have to discuss Mary's suffering and that character and the role they played. So just look out for that as well.
Perfect. So I think that could be us for a podcast B. Ro. Tell me any final thoughts? Are we happy out?
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Yeah, and I think we'll probably get through a lot of them in the questions now anyway. So
more. Yeah. I think it's quite nice though to well, this is what I feel. All feedback welcome by anybody who's listening, to have the overview to kind of get settled, because some students don't even know what the crack is there. Have an idea of a detailed plan, and then go to the literally exactly what they're asking and see, have we already answered any of that stuff, but then could we add onto that, because sometimes students come from a different perspective or from a different school from it, so they have some interesting questions. Okay, Ro, thanks for getting up at 3 a.m. to do this for us here. Great start to the day. Nothing better than I think that's actually in most of the morning routines that we talk about. You get up, hydrate, get a coffee in, do a podcast about Irish. I'm going to do this every day. No, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much, and some serious value there. And sorry, I forgot to mention this at the start as well. The new technology we have that you've come up with there with the switching the screen is fantastic.
There's no boards. There's no.
Your Steven Spielberg days are over. But no, that's the thank, because obviously you spent time preparing that and putting that in. So thank you very much. All right, Rose. So we'll chat to the student questions soon, and have a great day.
All right, cheers. Thanks.
All right. God bless. All right.